In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, I speak here. Thank God, we now on chapter 80. Chapter 80. Okay, we look at the superscription. Here it says is a testimony of Asa, right? Now, I think this one is set to the lilies, right? Now, I think there are quite a number of psalms which are set with this title as well. One of them is in chapter 45. I'm not sure if you have noticed this. Okay, chapter 45 is set to the lily, right? Set to the lily. And also, if you look at chapter 60, if I'm correct, yes, it's set to lily of the testimony. Again, it's a psalm written by David, or a Michtam by David. Okay, we also can look at chapter 69. 69, yeah. This is a kind of psalm set to the lilies, right? I don't know how to pronounce it. Shoshanim. Shoshanim. You have studied Hebrews before. You should know how to pronounce it. Okay, now we're back to chapter 80. Now, I guess I need to just first divide the chapter. 1 to 6, 7 to 13, and then 14 to 19. Yeah. Okay, 1 to 6, 7 to 13, and then 14 to 19. Now, before we talk about this chapter, I want to first mention a few key points in this chapter to help us understand the chapter better. Now, I'm not sure if you have noticed if I can put it, the refrain, used in this Psalms. Yeah. Now, verse 7, right? Verse 7. In fact, verse 3 onwards. Verse 3. Restore us, O God, cause your face to shine, and we shall be saved. Right? Now, if you look at verse 7, here it says, restore us, O God of hosts, cause your face to shine, and we shall be saved. And the same is mentioned in verse 19, right? Now, I guess by looking at this verse or this refrain, we understand, roughly what the writer wants. Okay, it's like, I think the main idea is to ask God to shine, to shine on them, right, and cause His face to shine on them. Now, I guess I mentioned this in quite a few times, and whenever the Bible talks about, God's face shines upon His people, what does that mean? What does that mean? Now, I mentioned about a verse that defines shining with His face. Which chapter is that? Which book? Remember? No? Okay. Refresh your memory. Return to Numbers. I think this verse is quite important, rather this passage. So I guess in the future, if you want to know exactly what His countenance or His face shined, then I guess you need to use this. Yeah? This is given to the priests when they are blessed. Okay. Now we look at chapter 6. We can read verse 24. All right. The Lord bless you and keep you. Talking about the priest here. the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. So when the Bible says his face shine upon us, it means that he is gracious towards us. Now, verse 26. Now the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. You know, the countenance, represent the peace of God. So when he said lift up his countenance upon you or upon us, it means that he would give us peace or give you peace. That's the idea. So this is how you define some of the concepts in the book of Psalms. Now, I think I didn't mention this to you. I did not. Yeah. Now, I guess it's important. Sometimes you use scriptures to interpret scriptures. So we try not to how can I say, stretch our imagination too much. You know, the safest and the best way to explain the Bible is to use the Bible. You know, I have learned that, throughout my ministry work, whenever I use the scriptures to explain, it tends to be, how can I say, more powerful. It's not because I'm more powerful, because the word of God is powerful, if you know what I'm saying, right? Now, I may use a lot of worldly example to explain. It seems that sometimes I just cannot touch the heart of the listeners, because I realize that examples of the world are not scriptural at times. But when I just quote a simple example, I'm not sure if you have noticed my sermon, I hardly talk about anything. I just use the Bible, and I find that it's very effective, right? So because if we can use the word from the scriptures, because it's the word of God, that's why it carries power. That's it. To me, it's simple. That's that. What I have been doing, in my ministry work is that I would always try to look for example based on the Bible. That is the best way. Best way. All right. Okay. Now, we look at verse 1. Okay. One other key point. Yeah. One other key points here is about. I'm not sure if you have noticed the vine is being mentioned here. All right, now if you look at verse 8, you have brought a vine out of Egypt. You have cast out the nation. Now, so the vine is mentioned. This, what is that? This vine or vineyard, is mentioned quite frequently in the Bible. Sometimes we need to define what a vine is or what a vineyard is. Yeah? Okay. Now, if you look at verse 14. Okay, verse 14. Now, return, we beseech you, O Lord of hosts, look down from heaven and see, and visit this vine. Okay. Now, verse 15. And the vineyard which your right hand has planted, and the branch that you made strong for yourself, right? So it's talking about, the vine here. Now, what does this vine represent? So obviously you need to look at other part of the scriptures to understand it, all right? Okay, since we are talking about this, yeah. Now, I want you to turn to, let me just double check Deuteronomy. Okay, chapter 32. Verse 32. For their vine is of the vine of Sodom, and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of serpents and the cruel venom of cobras. Is this not laid up in store with me, sealed up among my treasures? Now, so you find that, sometimes, if my understanding is correct, the vine of God can turn into like a bad one, all right? So I guess if you read the Isaiah, right? Isaiah tells us that, the grape that the vineyard produces, is wild grapes, right? I think it's Isaiah chapter 5, isn't it? Okay, we can turn to Isaiah chapter 5, yeah? Chapter 5. It's talking about God's people, yeah, turn evil, okay? God's people turn evil. Now, we look at chapter 5. I guess you are familiar with this vineyard song, right? Chapter 5, now, we read verse 2, now, especially the last part. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes, right? So quite clearly, this chapter is talking about the chosen people of God, because you have to look at verse 7, yeah, to understand now. So the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. Okay, now, so when the Bible uses the term vineyard or a vine, yeah, in many cases, I would say it refers to the chosen people of God. Right now, so in our context today, we can say that it refers to the community of faith, the church. So I guess if you want to talk about prefigurations, or if you want to make a metaphorical reference, to the church, you need to improve. Okay. Now, I cannot just simply tell people that, look, Zion is the church or prefigures the church. Now, on what basis do you say that? People might question you, right? Now, now, so I guess it's important to use scriptures to explain scriptures. I guess there are quite many examples given in in the Bible. Okay. Now, I want you to look at chapter 17 of Ezekiel, chapter 17. Now, I guess that there is a maybe my reading is not very accurate. That's why I want you to help me, read this passage. Now, if you read from verse 3 to verse 6, yeah, what is your reading of it? It talks about a great eagle, okay? And what happened is the great eagle took what? From the cedar, is it not true? The highest branch. Am I correct? When you read from verse 3, yeah? Is that also? Okay. Now, he cropped off its topmost young twig and carried to a land of trade. He set it in a city of merchants. Then he took some of the seed of the land and planted it in a fertile land. He placed it by abundant waters, and set it like willow trees, and grew and became a spreading vine of low stature. Now, where does this vine come from? Does it come from the seed, some of the seed of the land, or is it come from cedar? What is your reading of that? Where do you think it comes from? Okay, I asked this question, yeah, because when you read chapter 80, the same thing happened, it seems, all right? Now, I want you to turn back to Psalms chapter 80. It's like there is a, how can I say? There is a mention, yeah, of vine and cedar together, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, now I want you to read chapter 80, verse 8. Okay, now you have brought a vine out of Egypt. You have cast all the nation and planted it You prepare room for it and cause it to take deep root, and it filled the land. The hills were covered with its shadow, and the mighty cedar with its bow. She sent out her bow to the sea and the branches to the river. Now, what is going on here? Because in verse 8, it mentioned about what? Vine. Is it also? Why is it that in verse 10, it seems like there is a change of subject from vine to cedar? Do you notice that? Can you understand my question? Yeah? Now, so I guess that this is something that you probably need to find out a bit more, to understand why is it so. Okay, why is it so? Cedar to a vine and vine to a cedar. Okay. All right. That's my question. Basically, that's my question. I find it quite amazing in a way. All right. No, I guess I just want you to read another descriptions, concerning the vine. We turn to Hosea chapter 10. Hosea chapter 10. Now, verse 1. Israel empties his vine, he brings forth fruits for himself according to the multitude of his fruits. He has increased the altars according to the bounty of his land. They've embellished his sacred pillars. Okay, now, here it says empty his vine. Is like, it gives us the idea that it's like he has done away with the vine, right? Okay, it's like Israel no longer looks upon this vine very seriously, and instead what he like produces his own fruit. Yeah. And I think in verse 1 it talks about like idolatry basically. Okay, so now I guess to understand this, the vine, the concept of vine, you have to look at many part of the scriptures, because I guess each passage of the scriptures may just shed a bit of light on one aspect, of the vine. Okay, so you need to piece everything together. That's why I think I tell you it's a tedious exercise. I have to be honest with you. That's why sometimes I have to read through so many passages, similar passages. Sometimes I even have to read the entire chapter that that talks about the vine, the entire chapter, in order to understand. Sometimes you have to read like a one subject. I give you, for example, what I did is quite many years back anyway. I did my study on the concept of Zion. I practically have to flip from, how can I say, not Genesis, but from the history of the chosen people. Any passage that talks about Zion, then you have to look at it, you have to read it, and all the way to the end of the Bible, Revelation chapter 14. You have to read. I guess this is what you need to do as well. Right? So in order to have a better understanding of a particular subject. But my advice to you is you need to read first. Don't look at other books first. You read until you have a clear understanding, then you can look at the reference. You know why I said this to you? Because if you look at references first, then you find that because you do not have, let's say, enough information concerning this subject. So when you read sources outside, you can be controlled by them, if you know what I'm saying, right? So it is always advisable for you to read the scriptures yourself first, right? Now, again, I said based on the patterns of the sound word that God has given to the church. When you read it in this way, you tend to learn much more. If you ask me, do you read outside sources? Yes, I do. But I'll read the Bible first. I must understand what the Bible says first, based on what I have received. You know, all the outside sources are merely my reference. Like if you talk about the distance of a place from Jerusalem, for example, obviously I can't get it from the Bible. I would get it from outside sources. Right? If you talk about the condition, let's say, of Mount Zion, I wouldn't know about it because I can't get it from the Bible. I have to read it outside. Right? Okay. Right now, we're back to chapter 80. So these are some of the main points that we can look at, or that you can pay attention to. Okay, now we look at the first part, verse 1 to verse 6. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure if you have noticed Joseph is mentioned. Yeah, on this occasion, Joseph is mentioned. Then also Ephraim and Manasseh. What are the relationship between Joseph and Manasseh? What is their relationship?
Father and son.
Father and son. Okay. Now, so Manasseh is the firstborn, is it not? Or secondborn? Firstborn. Okay. Now, what is Benjamin then to Joseph? Same father, same mother. Yeah. Okay. Now, because we know that Jacob has 4 wives, right? Has 4 wives. Now we see that Benjamin actually is the blood brother to Joseph. It's not half brother, right? It's from the same parents, basically. Okay. Now, so here it says, so again, when you look at verse 1, it says, "Give ear, O shepherd of Israel, you who lead Joseph like a flock." Right? You who dwell between the cherubim shine forth. Now, I think this idea of God, dwelling between the cherubim is quite common, sorry, in the Old Testament scriptures, or sometimes you even say that, God rides on the cherubim, or cherub. Cherub is singular, cherubim is plural. Okay. So, when you look at Joseph, we understand that from the book of Genesis, he was such a powerful person, right? And you see that he became the governor of Egypt. In fact, he was like a father even to Pharaoh. Yes, officially, right, outwardly, Joseph was like the second in command, but in reality, he was on top of Pharaoh. Because Genesis tells us that, he was like a father to Pharaoh, meaning even Pharaoh has to come to him to consult him, with probably matters concerning the country or the nation, right? Now, you find that such a strong person also need help, also need, shepherding from God. Okay, now, so verse 2 says, "Stir up your strength and come and save us." Come and save us. All right. Now, I would assume that, if you look at history, now you find that Joseph, after Joseph died, all right, now the people of God continued multiplying greatly, and it became a threat to the Egyptian. So it's like they had to reduce the population of Jacob, right? And therefore, hence the story in Exodus, to kill all the male child at birth. Okay. Now, so if the psalmist is talking about that, then obviously you understand that they require a salvation here as well. Now, but I don't think, the writer is talking about that particular incident. Now, sometimes you can deduce it from the chapter, right? Now, if you can't get anything from the chapter, and possibly that is one of the reasons, right? Now, I said that is not the reason because of verse 4. Yeah? Verse 4. O Lord God of hosts, how long will you be angry against the prayer of the people? You have fed them with the bread of tears and given them tears to drink in great measure. You have made us strive to our neighbor, and our enemies laugh among themselves. Now, so I think it's more, on the time of the exile, right? And I think there are many similar passages in the book of Psalms, all right? So, and the writer, felt a very disheartening, and because of what was happening to them, is like they were being mocked at, and the enemies treated them, like nothing, and the children of God were reduced, to slaves, if you like. Okay. Now, so I think that is the reason why they cried out to God, to save them, okay, and to shepherd them. Okay, so roughly, this is the idea that you can see in this passage. Now, I guess I mentioned to you before in my previous lesson or lessons before, that there are ideas in the book of Psalm that we may not be made, they may not be easily or readily understandable, if you know what I'm saying. Therefore, you have to piece ideas together. You have to ask yourself, for example, why Joseph, why Ephraim, why Manasseh, why Benjamin are stated together, right? Now, I guess I've told you that before. You need to be a bit more inquisitive, right? So when you think more about it, then probably you begin to search more into it. Then you get a good or rough idea about, what has happened, in the Psalms. Okay. Now, so here it says, I think it's quite a scary thing, because not only God did not listen to their prayer, actually God is angry against the prayer of his people. Now, can you actually think of any reasons why God was angry against their prayer, or why God was against their prayer? Any reason that you can deduce from the Bible? I think it's important when you have found a verse, you have found a verse, and that is not readily, how can I say, clear to you when you start asking questions, and then you find more answers to it. You can develop many sermons, you know what I'm saying? And that is important, because this is how you develop. So of course we have to pray, we have to rely on God, but we also need to do our part. That's why sometimes I have to be honest with you, because I write a lot, right? Sometimes I can even sit down just 2 hours just to produce 2 paragraphs. Like each paragraph, I force myself to write like paragraph. It's not like 2 sentences, 3 sentences. I tell myself I might write 6 sentences per paragraph. If you look at my work, most of the time, it's not like I'm crazy or whatever. I force myself to come up with ideas. That's why sometimes I sit there for 2 hours. I still cannot produce two paragraphs, because my requirements upon myself is I must have 6 lines, at least 6 sentences. And thank God, most of the time. And then I ask a lot of questions, and therefore I'm not saying that I will always get good answers or whatever, but at least I try. This is the way. So you have to sit down and think. You start like how can I say, thinking about like Genesis, what happened in Genesis when Joseph was there, that kind of thing. It's like your brain has to go through the story again, your mind. Okay, right. So this is what answers can you give to the question in verse 4? All right, now, when I asked this question, immediately I got an answer from Proverbs. All right, I just want you to read. Okay, we read the chapter 28. Verse 9. Okay, I think here is even stronger. It uses the word abomination anyway. Now, one who turns away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayer is an abomination. Now, so meaning that for prayer to be answered, the primary condition is that, for us to fulfill, rather, is that we must listen. Now, listen here is not just about passive listening. Listen here is about, listening with actions, meaning with the will to do what you have heard. Okay, that's the idea. Now, so when you look at this, if we say that this passage is about the exile, then we understand why God has not answered their prayer. Not only God has not answered their prayer, God was angry with them because before the destruction of the city of Jerusalem or Judah, they did not listen to God's law. They turned a deaf ear to the law of God. Now, when you piece idea in this way together, you find that it becomes what? More encouraging. Now, we said you can say this by extension, right? By extension. You have many sub-points to help members understand your sermon better. Okay? So, what other example can you think of when you said, God was angry with their prayer? All right, now, one more example. I want you to read Isaiah chapter 1. Now we turn to Isaiah chapter 1. Verse 15. Now, when you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. The reason given here is blood, hatred. Okay, hatred. Now, so meaning, if anyone harbors hatred in the heart, his prayer obviously will be turned down. Regardless how sincere the person may be. And God will not, and he does not listen to the prayer of such a person, right? So, this is how you generate ideas, to help members. But because I don't have time, otherwise I would want you to really spend time thinking about, because previously, when we had more times actually, to be honest, they actually produce many sermons. Not just for me, but for themselves as well. It's good for themselves. I think they produce so many sermons in the past. So I think during your free time, because I have not given you any assignments here, because I want you to really, read the Bible yourself, and then, you make good notes for yourself here. But okay. Now, I just want you to understand, whatever you have written for me is the result. I will mark it. The result will be sent to. They just send me a letter, so we'll send it to the USG. So I believe that you will do your best. Yeah, you do not just simply do it. You have to do it carefully. Now, I think if you have any correction to make on your previous assignment, please do so within the next 2 days. Okay, because I need to. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So I give you 2 more days if you want to make any corrections to your assignments or whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, verse 7, yeah, to verse 13. Verse 7 to verse 13. Now, here is like a history, all right, mentioned here. Now, it's talking about what God has done in the past, God has taken all the trouble to, to plant this vine or whatever, and then develop into the mighty cedars, all right, and with many branches. Even you find that the branches are stretched to the river. The river here in verse 11 is actually what? The Euphrates, all right? Now the sea here, if you look at verse 11, she sent out boats to the sea. What sea do you think it is referred to? What sea do you think it refers to? The Mediterranean Sea, okay? Now, when you see the word river, I would say in most cases, it refers to Euphrates, right? Euphrates. Now, okay, just for okay, the question is, how many rivers actually surround the land of Palestine? How many rivers? It's more like the northeast, yeah, is what? River Euphrates. And then more like the south is what? River Egypt, right? River Egypt. Okay. Now, if you look at verse 7 to verse 13, it talks about, God has changed his mind now. What he has done in the past, he has paid so much attention to this vine, and what happened now is he has broken down the hedges. If you read from verse 12, yeah. Now, not only that, if you look at the second part of verse 12, so that all who pass by the way pluck her fruits, the boar out of the woods uproots it, and the wild beast of the field devours it. It's like God left it, to how can I put it? Left it to destruction. Okay, or left it to the devices of his enemies, of the enemies of Israel, and to allow them to do what they want. Okay, so this is something that the writer is asking God, why? Now you may say, what lesson? How can we learn something from it? Now I think you can also teach the members. If things are not going your way, right, then obviously you need to examine yourself and ask questions. And have you been right? Have you been doing things which are not right in the eyes of God? Stuff like that. So I guess this is the question that you can ask. All right, now we look at the 14, the last part. Now, so it's like begging God to return. The writer and the rest have beseech God, all right, asking him, to look down from heaven. Right? They were praying in desperation, obviously, and saying that the vineyard, that you have planted, is now being burned with fire. It is cut down. They perished at the rebuke of your countenance. Now, what is the? Just now we mentioned countenance is peace, isn't it? Just let me double check. The face is grace. Now, what is the opposite of peace? Okay. Yes, the face is grace and the countenance is peace. Now, no peace mean what? War, isn't it? Enmity, yeah, hostility. Now, it seems that they were facing the hostility of their enemies simply because God has removed his peace from them. Okay, now again, the writer is begging God, to stretch out his right hand again, to do something about the situation. Ask God to turn back to him to revive us, to revive them. Now, I guess, here it tells us about the persistence of the writer to pray to God for help. Okay, now, so, no, it's like saying to them, it's like saying to God, rather, that, if he does not return to them, then obviously they are doomed, right? They are doomed. Okay, now, so roughly, this is the chapter, okay? It's like saying to God, this is the vineyard, what happened now? Look, God, please do something about it. Right? Now, I guess, you can see similar ideas, being presented in other parts of the Bible. Okay, just want to give you one example. But this time it's not talking about the vineyard, it's talking about the green pasture. All right, now I want you to quickly read Joel chapter 1. Okay, Joel, Joel chapter 1. Now you read verse 19, actually is the cry of the prophets. Oh Lord, to you I cried out, for fire has devoured the open pastures, and the flame has burned all the trees of the field. The beasts of the field also cried out to you, for the water brook are dried up, and fire has devoured the open pasture. All right, now obviously you can see a revival of that when you come to chapter 2, like verse 22. Do not be afraid, you beasts of the field, for the open pasture are springing up, right? So it's quite a common thing, in the Old Testament scriptures, because the people of God sin against him. Okay, now we're back to the book of Psalms. Now we come to chapter 81. Chapter 81. Now, this chapter actually to me is a very important chapter. Is a chapter that I guess will tell us why chapters why God has deserted them, as stated in chapter 18. Now, if I can put them together, then I can see a clearer picture of what is going on. Okay, now we don't normally join two chapters of Psalm in this way. Okay, now for me to do that, because first is written by Asaph as well, and here it also mentioned the reasons why God has deserted them. Right? You can use this as an example to explain, or you can just talk about this chapter in itself. Okay, now before I go on, I want to first divide the chapter into two parts. The first is from verse 1 to verse 7, a Selah at the back, and then verse 8 all the way to the end of the chapter, which is verse 16. Verse 16. Now, I just want to bring to your attention some of the key points. First is in verse 4, verse 4. For this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. Now it's talking about a law of the God of Jacob. We want to find out what this law is. Now, if you look at verse 5, Joseph is mentioned again. That's why I connect it to the previous chapter. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. All right. Now, this he established in Joseph as a testimony when he went throughout the land of Egypt, where I heard the language I did not understand. Okay, so I want you to try to think about this statute for Israel and the law of the God of Jacob, what do you think the writer is talking about here? Now, it seems that, it doesn't really mention, what that law is or what that statute for Israel is, right? Now, I guess you can only deduce it from the second part, verse 8 all the way to verse 16. Now, if you look at verse 8, verse 8, hear, all my people, and I will admonish you, all Israel, if you will listen to me. Now, obviously, when God admonishes his people, he would use his law or his word to admonish them. Is that not true? Okay. Now, so when you look at the verse 9, you find that is the key idea in this chapter. That is, they must not have any foreign god. Right? Now, so with this, when you look at verse 4, then you understand why this statute is so important to Jacob. Okay? And why this law, of the God of Jacob must be made known throughout, the entire nation. Okay. Now, so we can only use information based on what we can get in the chapter. Even if you say that this is the law of God, there is nothing wrong with that, because that is the problem that the people of God, have been facing, being unable to really submit themselves to the authority of God. Right now, so to me, the main part is about foreign God, how to get rid of that, and the consequences of having, foreign gods or a foreign God in the heart. Okay, that's basically the chapter. So again, I think when you read this is how I read the book of Psalms. I always look for some key points and ask questions, and then thank God, then not all the time, but sometimes I'm able to piece the information together, the idea together. Okay, now we're going to look at the first part, verse 1 to verse 7. Now this is more like, praising God and singing, out loud to the Lord God, right? And he says, sing a song to him, whatever. For this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. Now, so shouting to God, some people say shouting to God, praising God is a law of God. Now, okay, now we must find out why must they give thanks to God, right? Give thanks to God. All right, now, I want you to read verse 6 and verse 7. I removed his shoulder from the burden, his hands were freed from the basket. You called in trouble and I delivered you. I answered you in the secret place of thunder. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Now, it's like it mentioned about the past, how God actually has helped them before. Okay. Now, this is the mighty deeds of God. Some of the Psalms have been written in such a way that, they piece different, historical facts together, right? And this is one of them, and it said, I tested you at the waters of Meribah. It said, I removed his shoulder from the burden, like in verse 6, It's like we said before they came out of Egypt and after they came out of Egypt, that kind of thing. Now, so you see that this is what God has done for them. And the main point here is because God delivered them. God delivered them. Okay, that's the main idea. Now, so when you come to the second section, to me, this one is quite important. Is that, the people of God must listen. There must be no foreign God among you, nor shall you worship any foreign God. Okay, now, so this must become a testimony or become a law that must be known to all, not just the present generation or the then generation, but also generations to come. Okay. Verse 10, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it now. Here it says, it says to us that, if God actually want to fill them, satisfy them fully, but the condition is that they must not have what? Foreign God. Now, if you look at verse 11, this is a very strange, a behavior on the part of the people of God, because in verse 11 it says, but my people would not heed my voice, and Israel would have none of me. So it's so strange. So when you look at them, we said, these people were so silly, did they not know that God actually was the one who saved them or whatever? We just like saying that they're so, they're no-brainers, okay? But in reality, when we look at ourselves, we are not better than them, to be honest. We are not so much better than them, because we do have foreign gods as well, right? And so, in a way, like saying that, we are not willing to be fed by God. Now, so what happened? If you look at verse 12, so I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsel. I guess this is quite, how can I put it? This is, if we are not careful, you find that you will end up, like doing things by our own standard, that kind of thing. And God will give us up, right? God will give us up, because we do not, submit to his counsel and to walk by his way. Now, if you look at just now, where is it? Verse 8, if you will listen to me, and here again it said, oh, that my people will listen to me, that Israel would walk in my ways. It's like God keeps beckoning them, to listen to him, to listen to his word, that kind of thing, all right? Now, the benefits of listening to God in this chapter is that God will soon subdue their enemies and turn his hand against their adversaries, right? Adversaries, right? Now, so you find that, if they were willing to listen to the voice of God, then if you connect it back to chapter 80, you'll find that their prayers would not have become an abomination to God. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. God will help us to subdue our enemies. And now, verse 15, I would say food for thought. You know why? The haters of the Lord would pretend submission to him, but their fate would endure forever. Now, what is your reading of this? Now, who are the haters of the Lord? That's the first question. Now, the second question, how would they pretend submission to God? Okay, when you say someone hates God, what does it mean? What does it mean to you? Do you think a believer of God in the TJC can end up hating God? I would look at it in this way, because the Bible says you need to love God with all your totality, right? Now, so anyone who loves himself only, then he is a hater of God. Now, if he loves himself, it means that he will not follow God's way. He will not do his commandment. And then we can say that this person is a hater of God, right? Now, hate means he does not do God's will, right? He does not do God's will. Now, so you find that, and they can pretend submission is like, oh, they are very fervent. Okay, now like the example that we can see obviously is in the New Testament, right? Like the scribes and the Pharisees, they knew the law, but in reality, they did not really, follow the commandments of God. Okay, I'm not sure if you remember this verse in the previous, chapter 78, right? Now we read verse 36 and 37. I think the idea is almost identical. Nevertheless, they flattered him with their mouth, and they lied to him with their tongues. For their heart was not steadfast with him, nor were they faithful in his covenant. Okay, so meaning these people, were not really serious about, their faith, or they did not take God very seriously. Now, we're back to chapter 81. Yeah? And so here it says, the fate, meaning their time, would endure forever, meaning their destiny, right? Would not be a good one, and it will last on forever. Now verse 16, he would have fed them also with the finest of wheat and with honey from the rock. I would have satisfied you. I would have satisfied you. Okay, now so it's quite clear that anyone who has worshipped God wholeheartedly, by removing any form of foreign gods from their hearts, then he would be satisfied by the goodness of God. God would give them the best, right? That's the idea. So it's quite simple if you have understood the structure, right? The idea in this chapter. Okay, I think we take a break.